Among all the qualities people attribute to God, perhaps none is more comforting than his willingness to forgive. Human beings have always struggled with failure. We make mistakes, hurt others, break promises, and carry burdens of guilt that seem impossible to put down. Throughout history, people have searched for ways to be free from shame and to find peace after wrongdoing. At the center of the Christian faith stands a remarkable truth: God forgives. Divine forgiveness is not a minor theme or a secondary idea. It lies at the heart of the relationship between God and humanity. The story of faith is, in many ways, the story of a loving Creator continuously reaching toward imperfect people and offering mercy when they least deserve it. Forgiveness is something every person longs for. Even those who appear strong carry regrets hidden deep within their hearts. Many people live with memories of words they wish they had never spoken, decisions they wish they had never made, and opportunities they wish they had not wasted. Some spend years punishing themselves for failures that no one else remembers. Others believe their mistakes are so serious that forgiveness is impossible. Yet the message of God's forgiveness offers hope to every weary soul. It declares that no failure is too great, no heart too broken, and no person too far gone to receive mercy. Every human being knows, at least in some measure, what it feels like to be guilty. Guilt is one of the most universal experiences in life. It crosses cultures, languages, and generations. A child feels guilty after disobeying a parent. An adult feels guilty after hurting a loved one. Entire nations sometimes carry the burden of past mistakes and injustices. People respond to guilt in different ways. Some try to ignore it. Some bury themselves in work or distractions. Others become angry, defensive, or cynical. Still others attempt to compensate by striving for perfection. Yet none of these solutions truly remove the burden. There is something deep within the human soul that longs to hear the words, "You are forgiven." Forgiveness has the power to restore hope. It can mend relationships, heal emotional wounds, and free people from the chains of shame. Without forgiveness, people become prisoners of their past. They carry invisible weights that affect their relationships, their self-worth, and even their physical and emotional health. God understands this need better than anyone because He created the human heart. He knows the pain that guilt causes and the loneliness that shame produces. Therefore, His response to human failure is not immediate rejection, but an invitation to mercy. To understand divine forgiveness, one must first understand the character of God Himself. Forgiveness is not merely something God does occasionally. It is deeply connected to who He is. God is often portrayed as perfectly holy and perfectly just. These qualities are essential because they remind us that wrongdoing matters. Our choices have consequences, and evil is not ignored. Yet alongside justice stands another profound truth. God is also merciful and compassionate. His forgiveness flows from His love. Divine mercy is not weakness. It is strength expressed through compassion. It is the decision to offer grace when judgment could rightfully be given. Unlike human forgiveness, which is often limited, God's forgiveness is astonishingly patient. Human beings sometimes forgive once or twice and then grow weary. God repeatedly offers opportunities for restoration. Throughout history, people have failed Him in countless ways, yet His response has continually been an invitation to return. Again and again, He demonstrates that mercy is greater than condemnation. This truth has brought comfort to millions of people through the centuries. It reminds us that God is not waiting eagerly to punish us. Rather, He desires reconciliation and restoration. Forgiveness is essential because brokenness separates people from peace. When guilt remains unresolved, it creates barriers. People often become trapped in cycles of self-condemnation. They replay old mistakes in their minds and convince themselves that they no longer deserve joy or happiness. But forgiveness breaks these chains. God's forgiveness says that a person's worst moment does not have to define their entire life. This does not mean that mistakes have no consequences. Rather, it means that failure is not the end of the story. Some of history's greatest examples of faith are people who made serious mistakes and yet experienced divine mercy. Their stories remind us that God specializes in redemption. He takes broken people and gives them new beginnings. A person who truly understands forgiveness begins to see life differently. Shame loses its power. Fear begins to fade. Hope returns. The heart discovers that it is possible to start again. Human forgiveness can be difficult because people are imperfect. We remember injuries, hold grudges, and struggle to trust again. Sometimes our forgiveness comes with conditions. God's forgiveness is different. His mercy is not based on human worthiness or perfection. If forgiveness depended upon deserving it, no one would ever receive it. Divine forgiveness is a gift. It is an expression of grace. This truth is difficult for many people to accept because human beings naturally believe they must earn everything they receive. We think we need to work harder, suffer longer, or become better before we can be forgiven. But God's forgiveness teaches a different lesson. Mercy is offered because of love, not because of merit. This changes everything. It means that a person who has fallen can rise again. It means that someone carrying years of regret can finally lay down that burden. It means that no one is beyond hope. One of the most beautiful aspects of divine forgiveness is the gift of a second chance. Life often feels like a collection of missed opportunities. People lose relationships, make poor decisions, and sometimes believe they have ruined everything. Yet God's forgiveness repeatedly offers new beginnings. A second chance is not merely an opportunity to try again. It is a declaration that failure does not have the final word. Many people spend years believing they are defined by their worst mistakes. They see themselves through the lens of guilt and cannot imagine a future free from shame. God sees something different. He sees potential where others see failure. He sees beauty beneath brokenness. He sees the possibility of restoration even when people have given up on themselves. This is why divine forgiveness inspires such hope. It reminds people that no chapter of life has to be the final chapter. There is always the possibility of redemption. Perhaps one of the hardest forms of forgiveness is self-forgiveness. Many people find it easier to believe that God can forgive others than to believe He can forgive them. They hold themselves hostage to past failures. They replay old memories and speak harsh words to themselves that they would never say to another person. Yet if God extends mercy, refusing to accept that mercy becomes another form of bondage. Self-forgiveness does not excuse wrongdoing. Instead, it accepts that grace is greater than failure. It means acknowledging mistakes, learning from them, and moving forward instead of remaining imprisoned by them. There are countless people who appear successful on the outside but secretly carry enormous guilt within. They smile, work, and continue with life, yet deep inside they are still fighting old battles. God's forgiveness invites those people to rest. It offers freedom from endless self-condemnation. It says that the past may shape a person, but it does not have to define them. One of the most beautiful truths about God's forgiveness is that it is never offered reluctantly. Human beings often forgive with hesitation. We may forgive outwardly while still carrying resentment in our hearts. Sometimes we set conditions and barriers before extending mercy. We wait to see whether the other person is truly sorry, whether they have suffered enough, or whether they deserve another chance. God's forgiveness is different. Throughout the history of faith, God continually invites people to return to Him. Even when people wander, make destructive choices, or turn away from what is good, His voice remains one of invitation rather than rejection. This does not mean that wrongdoing is ignored. It means that mercy is always available to those who are willing to receive it. There is something profoundly comforting in knowing that God does not delight in human failure. He does not rejoice when people stumble. Instead, His desire is restoration. Many people imagine God as a distant judge waiting for reasons to condemn them. They live with a constant fear that one mistake too many will finally exhaust His patience. Yet the message of divine forgiveness paints a different picture. It reveals a God who patiently waits for His children to come home. A God who sees every tear of regret. A God who understands human weakness better than people understand themselves. A God who welcomes the weary and the broken. For many people, this realization changes everything. They have spent years running from God because they were ashamed of their failures. They believed they had gone too far or sinned too greatly to ever be forgiven. But forgiveness begins with the understanding that no one is beyond God's mercy. There is always a path back. There is always hope. Although God's forgiveness is freely offered, receiving it requires honesty. Forgiveness begins when a person is willing to acknowledge their need for mercy. This is often difficult because human pride resists admitting failure. We naturally want to justify ourselves. We explain our actions, blame circumstances, or compare ourselves to others. Yet healing begins when excuses end. Repentance is often misunderstood. Many people think it simply means feeling guilty or ashamed. But true repentance is deeper than regret. Regret says, "I wish I had not suffered the consequences." Repentance says, "I recognize that I was wrong and I want to change." Repentance is not merely an emotional experience, it is a turning of the heart. It is the decision to stop walking away from what is good and begin walking toward it again. This process can be painful because it requires honesty. We must confront the parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore. We must acknowledge our selfishness, pride, anger, bitterness, or mistakes. Yet this honesty is not meant to destroy us. It is meant to heal us. A doctor cannot treat a hidden wound. Likewise, forgiveness begins when we stop hiding our brokenness and bring it into the light. The remarkable thing about God is that He already knows every weakness and every failure. Nothing surprises Him. Nothing shocks Him, and still He offers mercy. Receiving forgiveness can sometimes be harder than asking for it. Many people carry deep shame. They believe their mistakes define them. Even after they seek forgiveness, they continue punishing themselves. Some replay old memories every day. Some feel they must suffer in order to pay for their failures. Others secretly believe that they no longer deserve happiness. But divine forgiveness challenges these beliefs. It declares that a person's identity is greater than their worst mistake. Many people spend years imprisoned by guilt because they confuse conviction with condemnation. Conviction points out wrongdoing so that healing can begin. Condemnation says there is no hope. Conviction leads to freedom. Condemnation leads to despair. God's forgiveness is never intended to crush a person's spirit. Its purpose is to restore. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Every mistake, every regret, and every painful memory becomes another stone. Over time, the weight becomes unbearable. Many people walk through life exactly this way. They smile on the outside but carry enormous burdens inside. Forgiveness invites them to put the backpack down, to stop carrying yesterday's failures, to stop living as prisoners of the past, to finally breathe again. Grace is one of the most extraordinary ideas in all of faith. Grace means receiving kindness that has not been earned. It means being loved despite imperfection. It means being given another chance when one deserves judgment instead. Human beings are accustomed to earning things. We work for promotions. We study for good grades. We save money to purchase what we want. Because so much of life operates on merit, many people assume that forgiveness must also be earned. They think, if I become good enough, perhaps God will forgive me. If I suffer enough, maybe I can pay for my mistakes. If I work hard enough, perhaps I can erase my past. But grace says something completely different. Grace says that forgiveness is a gift. It cannot be purchased. It cannot be earned. It can only be received. This truth humbles us because it reminds us that every person stands in need of mercy. No one is perfect. No one is entirely free from failure. Every person depends upon grace. And because we have received grace, we are called to extend grace to others. God's forgiveness does more than remove guilt. It changes lives. People who experience genuine forgiveness often become different people. The angry become gentle. The bitter become compassionate. The hopeless begin to hope again. The broken discover healing. Forgiveness transforms because it removes shame. Shame constantly whispers, "You are your mistakes. You will never change. You are beyond redemption." Forgiveness answers, "You are more than your failures. You can begin again. There is still hope." This transformation is not always immediate. Healing often takes time. Some wounds run deep. Some regrets linger. Yet forgiveness starts a process of renewal. It allows people to step into the future without being chained to the past. Many of the world's most inspiring stories involve people who found redemption after failure. People who believed their lives were ruined but discovered that mercy could create a new beginning. God's forgiveness has the power to rewrite stories, not by erasing the past but by redeeming it. One of the greatest misconceptions about faith is the idea that forgiven people never struggle again. The truth is quite different. Human beings continue to make mistakes. We continue to grow, learn, and sometimes fail. Forgiveness is not the reward for perfection. It is the gift that helps imperfect people keep moving forward. God understands human weakness. He knows that growth is often gradual. A child does not learn to walk without falling. Likewise, spiritual growth often includes moments of stumbling. The important thing is not never falling. The important thing is continuing to return to grace. Many people abandon hope because they become discouraged by their imperfections. They think, "I should be better by now. I keep making the same mistakes. I must have failed too many times. Yet God's patience is greater than human impatience. He sees the entire journey. He sees every effort, every struggle, and every sincere desire to change. His forgiveness is not exhausted by human weakness. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that every burden of guilt you have carried no longer has power over you. Imagine knowing that your mistakes no longer define your identity. Imagine being able to look toward the future without the constant weight of shame. This is the freedom that forgiveness offers. It does not mean forgetting the past. It means no longer being imprisoned by it. People who understand forgiveness often live differently. They become more compassionate because they know what mercy feels like. They become more patient because they understand human weakness. They become more grateful because they recognize the gift they have received. Forgiven people often become forgiving people. The mercy they receive begins flowing outward toward others. This is one of the most beautiful effects of divine forgiveness. It changes not only individuals but also relationships, families, and communities. God's forgiveness also teaches an important lesson. If we desire mercy, we must be willing to extend mercy. This can be incredibly difficult. Some wounds run deep. Some betrayals leave scars. Some people have caused tremendous pain. Forgiveness does not mean pretending the hurt never happened. It does not mean excusing wrongdoing, and it does not necessarily mean restoring trust immediately. Forgiveness means refusing to let bitterness control your heart. It means releasing the desire for revenge. It means choosing freedom over resentment. Bitterness often harms the person carrying it more than the person who caused the pain. It consumes energy, steals joy, and keeps old wounds alive. Forgiveness is not always easy. Sometimes it is a long and difficult process, but it is also a path toward healing. The people who learn to forgive often discover a profound peace that bitterness could never provide. There are many people who secretly wonder whether forgiveness could ever apply to them. They carry memories they cannot forget. They remember words they wish they had never spoken. They think about opportunities they wasted or people they hurt. Some have lived with regret for years. Some have convinced themselves that they are beyond redemption. But God's forgiveness speaks directly to these fears. It says that mercy is greater than failure. It says that grace reaches deeper than shame. It says that even the most broken heart can be restored. No matter how dark the night has been, morning can still come. No matter how many mistakes have been made, a new beginning is possible. No matter how heavy the burden feels, there is hope. Forgiveness does not erase every consequence of the past, but it does remove the chains that keep people trapped there. And that is why the message of God's forgiveness remains one of the most beautiful and life-giving truths ever offered to humanity. It is a message of mercy, a message of healing, a message of second chances, and above all, it is a message of hope. There are moments in life when forgiveness seems too beautiful to be true. Some people hear about God's mercy and immediately think, perhaps that is true for others, but not for me. They look at the long list of mistakes they have made and conclude that they have crossed some invisible line. They believe they have failed too many times, hurt too many people, or wasted too many years. The burden of regret can become so heavy that a person begins to see themselves only through the lens of their failures. They no longer remember their strengths. They no longer see their worth. They no longer believe they deserve peace. Yet this is precisely why the message of God's forgiveness is so powerful. It reaches people in their darkest moments. It speaks to those who have given up on themselves. It offers hope to hearts that have been carrying guilt for years. There are countless people walking through life with invisible wounds. They smile, go to work, care for their families, and fulfill their responsibilities, yet deep inside they are fighting battles no one else can see. Some regret a broken relationship. Some regret choices made in anger. Some grieve opportunities that will never return. Some carry shame from mistakes made decades ago. And some simply feel that they have become people they never intended to be. God's forgiveness speaks gently into all of these situations. It says, "You are still loved. You are still seen. You are still worthy of mercy, and your story is not finished." Understanding the difference between guilt and shame is essential. Guilt says, "I made a mistake." Shame says, "I am the mistake." Guilt can lead a person toward growth and healing because it acknowledges that something wrong has happened. Shame, however, attacks a person's identity. It convinces them that they are permanently broken and beyond redemption. Many people spend years trapped in shame. They define themselves by one chapter of their lives: a failed marriage, a lost opportunity, a terrible decision, an addiction, a betrayal, a season of weakness. But no single moment has the power to define an entire human life. God's forgiveness separates a person from their mistakes. It recognizes wrongdoing while also declaring that failure is not the final word. This truth brings tremendous freedom. You are not your worst day. You are not your greatest regret. You are not the mistakes you wish you could erase. You are a person capable of healing, growth, and renewal. Starting over can be frightening. Many people remain trapped in old patterns simply because they fear change. Even when offered forgiveness, they hesitate to accept it because accepting forgiveness requires hope. And hope can be risky. Hope means believing that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. Hope means believing that wounds can heal. Hope means believing that broken things can be restored. Sometimes people would rather remain in familiar pain than risk believing in a new beginning. But forgiveness always opens the door to renewal. A person who has been forgiven is invited to walk forward rather than backward, to build instead of merely regret, to learn instead of endlessly condemn themselves. Every sunrise is a reminder that new beginnings are possible. The world itself seems to whisper this truth. Night gives way to morning. Winter gives way to spring. Storms eventually pass. Wounds slowly heal, and hearts can be restored. The God who forgives is also the God who renews. One of the most comforting truths about divine forgiveness is God's persistence. Human beings often give up on one another. Relationships fail. Trust is broken. Patience runs out. People are labeled by their mistakes and left behind. But God's mercy is astonishingly persistent. He sees possibilities where others see failure. He sees beauty beneath brokenness. He sees the person someone can become rather than only the person they have been. Many people have given up on themselves. They have quietly accepted lives filled with regret because they no longer believe change is possible. Yet God's forgiveness continually extends an invitation. Come back. Begin again. Do not let your failures have the final word. There is profound comfort in knowing that divine love does not depend on human perfection. If it did, no one would stand. Every person has stumbled. Every person has experienced weakness. Every person has needed mercy. And because everyone needs forgiveness, no one should consider themselves beyond it. God's forgiveness does not exist merely to bring inner peace. It also changes how we relate to others. People who understand mercy often become more compassionate. They become slower to judge and quicker to listen. They become more patient with human weakness because they recognize their own need for grace. Families have been restored through forgiveness. Friendships have been rebuilt. Communities have healed. Entire lives have changed because someone chose mercy instead of bitterness. This does not mean that forgiveness is easy. Some wounds cut deeply. Some betrayals leave lasting scars. Some apologies never come. And some relationships cannot be restored in the same way they once were. Yet forgiveness still has power. It releases the heart from being controlled by resentment. It prevents pain from becoming permanent bitterness. It allows healing to begin. Sometimes forgiving another person is less about setting them free and more about setting yourself free. Bitterness is a heavy burden to carry. It drains joy, consumes energy, and keeps old wounds alive. Forgiveness, though difficult, often becomes the doorway to peace. There comes a moment when every person must decide whether to continue carrying the weight of yesterday. Many people cling to old regrets because they fear that letting go somehow minimizes what happened. But forgiveness does not deny the pain of the past. It simply refuses to remain trapped there. Imagine carrying a heavy stone every day. At first, you barely notice its weight. But over the years, it becomes exhausting. Your shoulders ache. Your steps become slower. You forget what it feels like to walk freely. Regret and bitterness can become such stones. People become so accustomed to carrying them that they no longer remember what freedom feels like. God's forgiveness invites people to put those burdens down, to rest, to breathe, to stop fighting battles that have already been surrendered to mercy. This freedom does not come from pretending that mistakes never happened. It comes from knowing that mistakes no longer have ultimate power. Being forgiven changes a person's identity. Instead of living from fear, they begin living from gratitude. Instead of seeing themselves only through failure, they begin to recognize hope. Instead of constantly looking backward, they begin looking forward. Forgiven people often discover new courage. They become willing to try again, to love again, to trust again, to dream again. Some people have spent so many years surviving that they have forgotten how to hope. Forgiveness restores hope. It reminds people that the future can still hold beauty, that joy can return, that peace can be found, and that healing is possible. A forgiven heart often becomes a gentler heart. It learns compassion because it has experienced mercy. It becomes more patient because it understands weakness. It becomes more loving because it knows what it means to receive grace. Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of God's forgiveness is what it reveals about His love. Human love is often conditional. We love when it is easy. We love when we are appreciated. We love when we receive something in return. But divine love reaches toward people even in their brokenness. It sees the mess and still chooses mercy. It sees failure and still offers hope. It sees weakness and still extends compassion. This kind of love is difficult to comprehend because it is so different from ordinary human experience. Many people spend their lives trying to earn acceptance, trying to prove themselves, trying to become worthy. Yet God's forgiveness reminds us that love comes first. Mercy comes first. Grace comes first. And because we are loved, we can begin to change. Not out of fear, not out of shame, but out of gratitude. One of the greatest gifts that forgiveness offers is peace. Not the absence of problems, not a perfect life, but a deep inner peace that comes from knowing that the past no longer controls the future. There is extraordinary relief in no longer needing to carry every failure, in no longer replaying every mistake, in no longer believing that one moment of weakness has ruined an entire life. Peace comes when a person finally accepts mercy, when they stop fighting grace, when they stop trying to earn what has already been offered. The forgiven heart can finally rest. It can sleep without being haunted by yesterday. It can look toward tomorrow without fear. It can live in the present with gratitude. Perhaps there are people reading these words who feel exhausted. People who have carried regret for so long that it has become part of their identity. People who are tired of pretending to be strong. People who wonder whether peace is possible. The message of God's forgiveness is for them. It is for the weary, the broken, the ashamed, the disappointed, the ones who believe they have failed too many times. It whispers gently, there is still hope. There is still mercy. There is still a future. No matter how dark your night has been, dawn can still come. No matter how many mistakes you have made, grace is greater. No matter how long you have carried your burdens, you do not have to carry them forever. At its deepest level, God's forgiveness is an invitation to stop running, an invitation to put down shame, an invitation to believe that redemption is possible. It reminds humanity that failure is never the end of the story, that mercy is stronger than guilt, that love is stronger than condemnation, and that grace has the power to make all things new. Every person will fail. Every person will need forgiveness. Every person will one day stand in need of mercy. And the beautiful message of divine forgiveness is this: no one is beyond hope. No one is beyond love. No one is beyond grace. The God who forgives does not merely erase guilt. He restores hearts, renews lives, and offers new beginnings. His forgiveness is an open door, a gentle invitation, a promise that no matter how broken the past may be, the future can still be filled with hope. And perhaps that is why the message of God's forgiveness has comforted countless souls throughout history. Because it tells every weary heart that mercy is real, love remains, and every ending can become the beginning of something beautiful.